discussion, COVID, public health, the mask mandate. I missed the last meeting, but I listened to it later online. And I have to say, I would like to have a discussion about how some of the more recent mandates are being enforced. I really feel like we're reaching a critical point, not just in Athens, but, I'm sure all of you have seen the rising numbers of COVID cases in Athens, in Ohio, in the country at large. And the message seems to be that if we don't start following some of these mandates, especially mask wearing and not going into parties, keeping social distancing, not being in large crowds or even small crowds, that's why we're in such dire trouble. So maybe, Tom, you can talk a little bit, because at the last meeting you kind of said, I think that it's better if people just learn good behavior. And, I have to say one thing that alarmed me, I was driving by I know this is not your jurisdiction at all, but I was driving by the sheriff's office and I saw someone, it was an employee, because they were punching themselves in, and they walked into the building without wearing a mask. And my first reaction was, boy, if law enforcement isn't even wearing a mask, and I've seen complaints on Facebook about going to the sheriff's office and employees aren't wearing masks. So I'm just wondering, has there been a change in the last month from law enforcement perspective about how to enforce these mandates and how serious? Okay, you're shaking your head. Why don't you talk for a few minutes and let us know what's going on?
I was only shaking my head to the question of whether or not there was a change in how we do enforcement. There's not been any increase in criminal jurisdiction from when we started in March to now, except for the city ordinance, which is civilian in nature and has to be based on complaint. And we're hardly getting any complaints into the police department on mask violations. And when we do, it's the same story. It's, I saw somebody without a mask in Walmart, and by the time we get there, they're gone, or Walmart's dealt with it. And so there's no enforcement to take. So, so I'm not aware that anything else has changed. Nothing. The mass gathering is still in place. We're not witnessing those now that the larger groups of students are gone. So, yeah, most of the stuff is happening indoors now. I mean, Thanksgiving last week would be a perfect example. There were people all over the county that got together for Thanksgiving. I'm sure of it, well outside of our jurisdiction and Ohio University's jurisdiction, and indoors where we can't see it and can't stop it and have no authority to be. So nothing's changed from that perspective.
Andrew, could you talk a little bit about what's going on campus in terms of enforcing mask wearing? And I'll tell you, my concern also, and I think all of our concern, is eyeing what's going to happen next semester with even more students coming back. And do you have a plan in place? Has there been a thought as to how this is going to be enforced on campus?
Yeah, so the university's policy is more stringent than state law. One of the challenges with enforcing the state law is the number of exceptions there are to wearing a mask. It makes it virtually impossible to stop somebody preemptively only because they're not wearing a mask, because there's just too many reasons why they may not be that are permissible under the law. Ohio University on campus has closed most of those loopholes, and there's a very specific process for receiving an exemption to be allowed to not wear a mask. And that requires registration with the Accessibility Services Office, et cetera. So the way we're treating it is if somebody's on campus, they're not wearing a mask, and they'll be given ample opportunity to comply, provided with a mask and whatnot. And if they are still refusing to wear a mask and refusing to leave, then we'll treat it as a criminal trespass and arrest them for criminal trespass if it comes to that. And we certainly hope it doesn't. Obviously, our first and foremost effort will be to handle it, for the university to handle it administratively. it's an interesting time and an awkward position for us to be in from a law enforcement perspective, as on the one hand, people are pushing very hard to get law enforcement and police out of doing jobs that are not uniquely police in nature, particularly as it relates to mental health and some of these other areas. But yet those same people are pushing equally as hard for the police to be the ones enforcing the mask orders. So our desire would be to limit the police involvement and for it to be handled administratively first and foremost, so that it's an opportunity for people to be educated and for them to understand why it's important to comply and why there's a need for it. If they just are refusing to comply and just refusing to cooperate, then it would escalate to the police as a criminal trespass offense, and that's how we would get involved.
And certainly I would add, too, on campus, certainly faculty and staff have been empowered to try to educate students who might not be wearing masks, especially indoors. And I would think that students would also be working and educating each other, too, because this is something, talk about self-interest, this is something that's affecting all of us. So, and anybody else have any questions about anything having to do with COVID, public health, enforcement, or just any general thoughts about it?
I do not.
Thanks for acknowledging that, because sometimes I don't know what silence means.
Well, there's some news on the vaccine front. Some of us in the state, some of the chiefs in the state took, and other admin people took part in a phone call yesterday with the FBI and the Department of Defense on the mass dispersion of the specifically the Pfizer vaccine, if and when it's approved, and it goes in front of the FDA board on the 17th, I believe. If it's approved, it'll ship within 24 hours. There's a plan to get it to each state and to each county, and the county's health department will control the dispersion in the county, and there are priority groups. Off the top of my head, I believe that Group 1A is healthcare workers and people in nursing homes and care facilities. And then Group 2 will be first responders, likely EMS first, and then people over age 70. I believe that's accurate. Andrew, have you heard any news on that? Were you on that call yesterday?
I wasn't, and there's nothing I can add to that.
Okay, so
the only difference I heard was that the last group you mentioned was over 65, but you might have more.
Possible, yeah, it's possible that it's 65. That's fine. Yeah, I know it was just the elderly in each county were in some of the first groups. So, yeah. And then there will be a similar plan put in place for Moderna's vaccine if and when it's approved. The Pfizer vaccine needs a certain environment that's cold, and there's only one location in the county and possibly even in the region here that meets those criteria. Fortunately, it's in Athens County and right in the city of Athens. So the Pfizer vaccine will be kept here in the city for Athens County.
Now, for first responders, and I'm, speaking. I know you can only speak to your own departments, but will the police departments require all their officers or all their employees, for that matter, to be vaccinated?
We have not even had that discussion, and I'm not. I don't know where the legality of that is and what we could do and should do, and haven't even had that discussion.
Yeah, I would think that healthcare workers, there's more leverage there depending on who they work for, because I think that a lot of the healthcare providers are going to require their employees to get vaccinations. But you're right. When you work for a public body, I don't know how that works either. Do you know, Andrew, is there going to be any university policy on that?
I imagine that there's extensive discussion occurring at legal and HR about it. I've not actually been involved myself just yet. My past experience at my where I came from was with the hepatitis vaccine, I think, which was strongly encouraged. We paid for it. We paid the officers to go and get it. But at the end of the day, nobody was required to get that vaccine. Now, that was a different situation in the sense that there was not a pandemic going on, and it wasn't as widespread. But it was still an important vaccination, I think, for first responders to have, and most of our officers voluntarily went and got it. But to what extent, as Chief Pyle said, we can actually mandate employees to get it. I think there's going to be a lot of litigation in that area, would be my guess.
Yeah, I don't off the top of my head, don't know of any rule or regulation that allows an employer or any entity, including the state, to require people to receive a vaccine. They can do it through disincentive, but I don't think that they can, at the end of the day, require it.
Well, I do know, the medical school requires all the medical students to be fully vaccinated. I do know that public schools often, there are exceptions, so people can apply for exceptions, but I do know public schools require their students to be vaccinated. So there is precedent for it. But yeah, this still is unprecedented. So
yeah, students versus employees is a slightly different. It's a question. It comes down to a question of whether or not the employee has an entitlement to the employment, and if you are, if a vaccination is sufficient, has a sufficient public interest to override their individual property right, and so. I imagine there is a pathway that you can require it in a situation like this, may be significant enough to do so. There would probably still have to be some sort of exemptions, but it's going to be an interesting analysis to try and figure out how far that individual right goes. Or do you simply say, if you don't want to be vaccinated, you just don't have to work for us. You don't have a right to work for us. Therefore, with a student, that's a little easier analysis, because obviously students can choose to go to somewhere else if they don't want to get vaccinated. It's a little bit different with an employee that has, essentially been an employee long enough that they have some type of property right in the job.
Yeah. I don't anticipate this going to be an issue, really, because I think the majority of police officers, firefighters, and EMS are going to jump at the opportunity to take a vaccine. So.
Yeah, that's my sense too. Anybody else have anything to say about this? It's so much easier when we're in the same room together, because you can look people in the eye and know if they're thinking or formulating a question or. Okay, well, feel free to go back to this if you think of something you want to say later. So the next thing on the agenda, update on the history of racism class for APD, OUPD. I have a feeling this will be on the agenda for months to come. I'm going to kind of defer to Andrew and Tom on this. I can tell you from the historian's perspective, we would normally be, the class is, we certainly, all of us want to go back and hone the presentations we're going to do, but it's virtually ready. I'm getting concerned. We've been talking about, well, maybe spring semester. First it was maybe fall semester when we had to cancel it in the summer, then it was maybe spring semester. I'm beginning to think that it's much more likely to go live during the summer. I think that's, the problem with doing a spring semester is probably not from the police department's point of view, but I know from the academic point of view, oh my goodness, our calendars fill up so quickly, and we need to offer this 4 times a week to accommodate all the different shifts. So I think our calendars will fill up. So from the academic perspective, I think it's most likely to happen during the summer. Okay.
I agree. In fact, I think we should just plan for it to happen in the summer. there's absolutely zero way we can put police officers in a study hall right now. And I mean, we're peaking in Athens County and around the state in the pandemic. And I think it will take months, probably well into March, even if we got a vaccine tomorrow, for it to have the desired effect. Maybe that's pessimistic, but, and as you said, it's, I can have my staff in a week's time, into the class, but if the instructors aren't available, then, we can't squeeze blood out of a stone, so to speak. So I think we ought to just plan for it to be in the summer, and we could probably even pick dates. Andrew and I, and can get with you and Jackie and flesh out some dates in June or July and just schedule it.
And I think we also need to count on, and we're also counting on a rapid vaccination schedule too. I think that should also work into it. And we're all hoping that it's going to happen by the summer. So yeah, let's do that. Let's plan on figuring out exact dates. And later in the summer is better because it'll give everyone more. It'll give the vaccination system more time to work. But yeah, if we could do
August, we could do August. That'd be fine.
We'll see, because that will bleed into fall semester as well. So I can talk to the other three historians and we can figure it out. But yeah, let's count on summer. Does that sound good with you, Andrew?
Yeah, that sounds ideal. I think it's going to be a sputtering restart, I think, as we work through, the spring semester. And I'm not terribly optimistic myself that students are going to be able to come back in the numbers we're expecting and not end up being sent home again. And so I think the spring semester is likely to be much like last spring. It's going to be kind of a rough and tumble semester. So I think waiting for the summer makes a lot of sense.
Great.
Anybody have any questions or comments about the history of racism class?
No, it seems as though that delayed start makes a lot of sense, especially just it's so hard to tell with COVID right now, right? Like making any kind of plans or we could plan right now, but we don't know if anything's going to happen. So it's very tricky. It's a tricky year.
And I think everyone is getting tired of planning things and then canceling them, which seems to be the pattern these days. So yes, I think planning ahead is really smart, planning far ahead. Anybody else? Are there any? Go ahead, Tom.
No, I just clearing my throat. Sorry.
Are there any questions in the chat?
No.
Okay.
There is a message from David Sudman. I believe I said that right. He says hello. He was appointed just today by Mayor Patterson to serve on JPAC.
Oh.
He cannot attend the full meeting today due to prior commitments, but he looks forward to next month's meeting, and he's humbled to serve. So,
and apparently there are 3 other vacancies, I guess.
Molly Birchfield and Toby Stock, their terms are up. And so the mayor's working on appointments for people. So Devin was a recent one.
Okay, so general discussion is, I'm not sure the difference between general discussion and roundtable. I think it's
the same thing.
It's the same thing. So normally if we were sitting in the same room, we would go around and I can ask everyone if they have any concerns. Let's start with Andrew Chicky. Is there anything on your mind that you want to say or ask the chiefs about?
Well, I have plenty of things on my mind, but I don't know that I have anything this evening to share or to ask of the chiefs. I appreciate their time this evening. Thank you.
Sarah, you're next on my screen. Sarah Grace.
Hi, sorry, I was unable to unmute myself there for a moment. I do not have anything at this time. Thank you.
What about you, Mary Catherine?
Hi, all. I do not have anything to ask, but I appreciate your time tonight.
And Cassie, you're here for Kim?
Hi, I also do not have anything tonight, but thank you.
Okay. Liesel?
Hi, I Just wanted to give an update. I don't know if people have seen from the Children's Services, our sanitary project looks a little different this year, but we are still accepting donations, monetary donations for that. I appreciate Chief Pyle and Powers being here and everything that law enforcement's doing right now. I know it's difficult to be out and about and in the field and working with the public right now. So thanks, guys, for being here.
Yeah, this is hard on everybody. I feel students' pain because I meet with them every day, and life is just not easy right now. Let me ask you, we canceled the last meeting. Let me ask you this, because you were worried about, it was election week, I think. Yes, it was election week. I take it there was nothing, there were no problems on campus, no problems in town?
No problems.
And no problems in the aftermath either?
No. No
Well,
problem.
I'm gonna knock on wood because I think depending on who you talk to, there are some that probably don't think it's over yet. So as things get finalized and we get closer to January, we'll have to certainly not let our guard down. But at this point, there's certainly not been any kind of any sort of issue.
Anything that you're hearing, Mary Catherine?
Not in particular. The university has done, I think, a really great job having some different sessions talking about folks to process after the election, during the election, COVID stuff, 2020 in general. There's been a lot of joint things with DNI. It was just diversity, inclusion, and CPS. And I know other groups around as well. And so people are being really communicative, sharing resources. And I think that overall things are going all right thus far, but we're always ready and very receptive, especially going into finals time. This is a stressful time for a lot of students and staff and faculty, honestly. But making sure that everybody has resources that they need and the people to talk to when they need to talk.
Cassie, I think I just saw something flash on my screen. Did you put a message in the chat?
She did. She just wanted everyone to know that Kim had phoned in and is on the call, but she doesn't have any updates.
Thanks. Well, I think this is a record quick meeting unless anyone has anything else they want to bring up.
Happy holidays.
Yeah.
I hope everybody stays safe and healthy and happy as best as they can.
Yep. Excellent sentiment.
I have plane tickets next week to visit my daughter in Austin, and with the CDC saying everyone needs to stay put, I feel like it is my public responsibility to cancel those plane tickets.
Yep.
It's just really hard. It's really hard right now.
Really, really hard. I feel that.
Will everybody stay safe?
Yep.
Take care.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for being here.
Bye, y'all.
See you next month.